The arena fell silent. When the beast roared, the human just yawned. The Colosseum of Xerion Prime stretched endlessly upward, its crystalline walls refracting the light of 3 suns into a kaleidoscope of colors that danced across the faces of 50,000 spectators. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered for the grand combat tournament. Zephyrians with their scaled hides, Korthak warriors bearing 4 arms each, the ethereal luminari floating in their energy forms, and dozens of other species that had carved their names into the annals of galactic warfare. At the center of it all, in the sandy pit that had witnessed the rise and fall of champions for 3 centuries, stood Marcus Chen. The human looked remarkably unremarkable among the assembled fighters. No scales, no extra limbs, no natural armor or energy manipulation abilities. Just a lean frame wrapped in standard combat gear, dark hair slightly tousled, and an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. The crowd murmured with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Humans were new to the galactic stage, barely, a century since first contact, and their reputation preceded them. They were known as the species that talked too much, asked too many questions, and had the audacity to suggest improvements to technologies that had worked perfectly well for millennia. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," the announcer's voice boomed through the arena, translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. "Today we witness history. For the first time, a human has qualified for the championship round of the Grand Combat Tournament." A ripple of polite applause mixed with skeptical chittering swept through the stands. In the VIP section, Ambassador Tharix of the Hegemony Council leaned forward, his mandibles clicking with amusement. "This should be educational," he whispered, to his aide. "Perhaps it will finally demonstrate to these humans their proper place in the galactic hierarchy." The gates on the opposite end of the arena began to rise with a grinding roar that sent vibrations through the crystalline walls. What emerged from the darkness beyond made even the most battle-hardened warriors in the stands take an involuntary step back. The Ravager of Kethmore stood 12 feet tall, its obsidian carapace gleaming with an oily sheen. 6 eyes, each the size of a dinner plate, swiveled independently to survey the arena. Its forearms ended in claws that could shear through starship hull plating, and from its throat came a sound that had terrorized 3 star systems, a roar that could rupture eardrums and stop hearts. The beast had never been defeated. In 200 years of combat, it had reduced champions to quivering masses of terror before the fighting even began. Its roar was a weapon unto itself, a primal sound that triggered every survival instinct evolution had ever coded into sentient DNA. The Ravager drew itself up to its full height, expanded its chest cavity, and unleashed that legendary roar. The sound exploded across the arena like a physical force. In the stands, beings covered their auditory organs and cowered. Several of the younger spectators fainted outright. The crystalline walls resonated with harmonics that made the entire structure sing like a struck bell. Even the other champions, waiting in the wings, warriors who had conquered worlds, felt their knees weaken. The arena fell completely silent in the wake of that terrible sound. And then Marcus Chen yawned. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't defiant. It was just a yawn, the kind of involuntary response someone might have during a particularly boring lecture. He covered his mouth politely with the back of his hand, blinked a few times, and then looked at the Ravager with the expression of someone who had just been mildly inconvenienced. "Sorry," he called out, his voice carrying clearly in the stunned silence. "Long flight here. You know how it is with hyperspace lag." The crowd erupted, not in cheers or boos, but in a cacophony of confusion and disbelief. In the VIP section, Ambassador Catharix's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely. His aide was frantically checking biometric readings. "Sir," the aide whispered, "the human's stress levels, they haven't changed at all. His heart rate is actually slightly slower than baseline." The Ravager, for its part, seemed as confused as everyone else. Its 6 eyes swiveled to focus on Marcus, scanning for some sign of the terror that always preceded its victories. Finding none, it roared again, louder this time, putting enough force behind it to crack several viewing panels in the upper tiers. Marcus scratched behind his ear and shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Look," he said conversationally. "I don't want to be rude, but are we going to fight or are you just going to keep making noise? Because I've got dinner plans, and they're serving real beef tonight. That's pretty rare out here in the Rim territories." What happened next would be studied by xenobiologists for generations. The Ravager, a creature whose psychology was based entirely on dominance through intimidation, experienced something completely foreign to its nature. Doubt. It charged. The beast moved with surprising speed for something so massive its claws extended, ready to end this confusing encounter quickly. But Marcus was no longer where he had been standing. He had simply stepped aside, not dramatically, not with any superhuman speed, just the efficient movement of someone avoiding an obstacle. The Ravager's momentum carried it past him, and as it skidded to a halt, Marcus was already moving. He didn't have the natural weapons of his opponent, so he improvised. A discarded piece of arena equipment became a lever. The beast's own weight became its weakness. Basic physics, applied with the kind of practical creativity that humans had been using to overcome superior opponents since they first picked up rocks to hunt mammoth. The fight lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, the Ravager of Kethmore lay unconscious in the sand, and Marcus was sitting on a nearby bench checking his wristcom for the time. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice cracked slightly, "your new champion, Marcus Chen of Earth." The silence stretched on for nearly a full minute before someone in the crowd began to clap. Then another. Then another. Soon the entire arena was thundering with applause, not just for the victory, but for something they had never seen before. A being who faced the universe's greatest predator and found it merely ordinary. Later, as Marcus was leaving the arena, a young Zephyrian reporter managed to catch up with him. Sir, how did you do it? How did you resist the Ravager's intimidation?" Marcus paused and considered the question seriously. "You know," he said finally, "when you grow up on a planet with spiders, snakes, bears, sharks, tigers, crocodiles, and the IRS, you develop a pretty high threshold for scary. That thing in there?" He gestured back toward the arena. "That was just Tuesday." As he walked away, the reporter stared after him, finally beginning to understand something about these strange new beings called humans. They weren't fearless. They were simply accustomed to being afraid and doing what needed to be done anyway. In the VIP section, Ambassador Catharix was very quietly revising his species' first contact protocols. After all, any species that could yawn at a Ravager was probably worth taking seriously.